Good evening. I'm Larry Edwards, president of the Millersville chapter of the University of Georgia Alumni Association. Welcome, alumni and dogs. We're proud to host an evening with Jeff Dantzler. Virtually every state is represented on this Zoom call, and it's the largest Zoom meeting the Alumni Association has sponsored. We started our chapter in 2014, and this is our signature event. Annually held on the Tuesday prior to the opening game, the event is normally a standing room only gathering of 125 barking dog fans. This is our 7th year of hosting this event. Obviously, this year we're unable to have an in-person event, but circumstances now allow for a national audience to showcase this special event. Before I introduce Jeff, I'd like to recognize the Millersville chapter's communications director, Dana Lowe. Please check out the Millersville chapter's Facebook page. Dana posts the most current UGA information that will keep you in tune with all the goings on in Athens, both with academics and sports. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Jeff Dantzler. If there's a UGA sporting event, there's a good chance Jeff is calling play-by-play. The list includes UGA baseball, women's basketball, women's soccer, the pregame and postgame football broadcast, the Sunday morning brunch with the legendary Kevin Butler from the Hilltop Grill, a daily 3-hour radio show on 960 The Ref in Athens. He has worked 3 Olympic Games. He has broadcast games for ESPN and the SEC network. He is the acknowledged historian for UGA sports. As Kim K., formerly president of the University of Georgia Alumni Association, says every year, the football season starts right now in Millersville, Georgia. Here is the incomparable Jeff Dantzler.
Thank you very much to my great friend Larry Edwards, one of the best gentlemen in the world. He and his wife Sharon, such a wonderful family. Larry was the most valuable player of my bachelor party in the other Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada. And the fact that we're not together here on what is annually my favorite night of the year is disappointing. This will probably be the best we've ever felt the morning after one of these annual meetings. But it is an honor to be with everyone here, as unusual as the circumstances and as crazy as 2020 is. And I just want to thank everyone for coming on board today. As Larry told you, we've got virtually every state represented, which is quite an honor. In fact, with our baseball games a couple of years ago, my broadcast partner, David Johnson, and I, we started asking people to tweet in what state you were calling from. And by the second weekend of the year, this past season, which was a very short season, we had 38 states where fans had tweeted in to say hello. It's a little known fact with Larry. His last name, Edwards, he shares that. That's the maiden name of my beautiful wife, Emily, who is logged on today. And I had to warn Larry when Emily and I first started dating that if he got any text messages that seemed inappropriate, to not be alarmed at that point. But luckily, everything worked out, and Emily, my wife, and I, we've got 2 little dogs, Albus and Hermie, and life is good. I am a bit embarrassed. You have to tell when you graduated, as it says up there by the Millersville Alumni chapter, and mine says 2007, which unfortunately is accurate. I was a true freshman in the fall of 1991. And between my radio duties and working for the great Claude Felton and Dan McGill and Coach Dooley and trying to sample the nightlife of America's greatest college town, my academic prowess was probably not what it should have been. So then Coach Dooley told me at the turn of the century that it was time for me to go back and graduate, which I did. Also, when I told Coach Dooley and Mrs. Dooley that I was getting married, Mrs. Dooley, I think, had a heart attack. And Coach Dooley said, "Well, Jeff, how old are you now?" I said, "Well, Coach, I'm 43. At the time I was getting engaged, he said, "Well, you wouldn't want to rush into anything." I do feel like we're in another golden age of Georgia football. And speaking of the Dooleys, a couple of years ago, Emily and I were out walking and ran into Mrs. Dooley. And we just talked about how great it was with Kirby and Mary Beth and the young family with their 3 children and everything they're doing. And I think as Coach Dooley and Mrs. Dooley are at the age they are in their 80s, they are so appreciative of everything that Kirby and MB are doing here. And I certainly think it takes them back to the 1960s when they built it up here, along with Coach Russell and Coach McGill and Coach Hartman and all those great Bulldog legends. Although Barbara would be quick to tell you, Kirby makes more in a day than Coach Dooley used to make in a year back then. But I want to brag on Kirby and Mary Beth and the family and a lot of the things that they're doing right now. And one of those, I was honored, the last Zoom meeting I hosted, in fact, was in August, and it was for the Kirby Smart Family Foundation. And that is a tremendous organization. Kirby started that the spring of his first year, and they have raised money for over 70 charities. They've raised over $1 million that has touched the community, that has touched the state, that has just touched so many lives. And I think we've all seen how generous Kirby has been with the donation that he and Mary Beth just made. And another thing, with so much stuff that's been going on, Kirby is one of those guys. He's not an excuse guy. And what he's been able to organize with the football team spearheading it, and you're going to see all of our athletic teams follow suit here, I think is just fantastic. And I could especially relate to that with my wife, Emily, being a school teacher, is the Dogs for Pups program. And some of the problems with education in Clark County that have been identified right now, what the players have done, what Kirby's done, what the Athletic Association, what the university has gotten behind here, it's a 4-point plan to go and help school kids right now. And one of the things they're doing, that they're getting backpacks for kids. They're getting healthy snacks for the weekends. The kids are getting involved in terms of being healthy in exercise videos with the players, and also getting Wi-Fi to a lot of people that might not have it available. I grew up in a small town, and I know whenever I go visit my mom, sometimes getting Wi-Fi can be an issue. So that is just one of the things that he's done, that they've done to give back to the community. And everybody loves a winner. And I've said many times, and I hate to bore our regular Milledgeville Bulldog guests that have heard me say this, the only thing I've loved longer continuously than the Georgia Bulldogs in my life is my parents. And I am so proud of what the Smarts are doing. And I think it reflects the lifelong passion they have. This is where they've always wanted to be, and this is where they are. And I know, 40 years from now, they want to be in the same spot that the Dooleys are in right now, looking back on all of the wonderful things that they've done here. And certainly these last 3 years have just been phenomenal. I always joke about it. When you go back to Coach Rick's last home game, we beat Georgia Southern in overtime. And Coach Smart's first home game, we beat Nichols State by 2 points. If you'd have told any of us walking out of Sanford Stadium that day that the next 3 years would be Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, that probably would have been a hard sale there for us. But we've certainly done that. And Kirby has elevated Georgia back amongst the nation's elite. This is the best run we've had these past 3 years since the glory days of the early 80s. And speaking of 80 through 83, we had the 43-4-1, but I still always extend those glory days 2 more games. When in the second game in 1984, we beat Clemson on Kevin Butler's famous field goal. And today happens to be that anniversary. It was September the 22nd, 1984, when Butler kicked it, as the greatest college football announcer ever said, 100,000 miles. And I asked Kevin today, do you get more attention on this day or on your birthday? And he said, without a doubt, it is this day, the anniversary of the great field goal to beat the Clemson Tigers. There's so much excitement over this year's team. And of course, as we all know, it's a unique year that has, given all of us unprecedented challenges. But one of the things I think that has brought so many of us together is Georgia football. And when you think about that, year after year, season after season, the University of Georgia, Georgia athletics, what it means to so many people. And I'm sure for everyone here, you're probably like me. I'm on a boatload of group text, including one with Larry that's always G-rated. And inevitably, at least once a day, the subject of Georgia football comes up. It's a commonality for so many of us, and we reflect on those memories. And just thinking about Kevin's kick today, I posted something on Twitter about it, and I must have gotten 50 responses from people saying, I was at the game, I was listening, I was driving in the car, whatever it may have been. And to me, that's a prime example of what Georgia football means to so many people, what the University of Georgia means to so many people, and why it's so important to so many people for so many reasons to get it back going again. And I know we can all feel the excitement with the first game against the Arkansas Razorbacks coming up. And this is one of those deals. Isn't it crazy? A Georgia thing. Sam Pittman, who did such a great job recruiting and is our offensive line coach, is now the head coach at Arkansas. And I think Kirby made a grand slam hire, and Matt Luke to come in here and replace him. And Coach Luke is our assistant head coach, and I think he did a heck of a job at the University of Mississippi as he was their interim coach and then became their full-time coach. But circumstances had him wind up here in Georgia, and I think that's been a wonderful addition to the coaching staff. He did a great job in the Sugar Bowl, kept a fabulous offensive line class together, and is a prime example of the new offensive staff. Of course, we all know Kirby brought in Todd Monken to be the offensive coordinator. And another thing that really impresses me about what Kirby has done here, it would have been very easy. And I know last year, when you think about all the attrition that we suffered, particularly on offense, particularly amongst the pass catchers, particularly at wide receiver, when you think about all of that attrition, the fact that we were still able to go 12-2, we beat Florida, Auburn Tech, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and won the Sugar Bowl. And I always think, good God, what I wouldn't have given for a season like that in the late 80s. It would have been very easy. But even with all the attrition on offense, it would have been very easy for Kirby to have dug in his heels and say, heck no, I'm not changing a thing for the reasons that were just mentioned there. But I think he realized that to get to that top rung on the ladder, that final rung, which can often be the hardest one to get to, just like it's one thing to break 90, then another thing to break 80, and another thing to break 70 in golf. To get to that final rung, he felt like he needed to tinker with some things and tweak a few things, and he certainly did that with the offensive staff. I'll just make a quick run through the depth chart here, and I know we don't have you guys under house arrest at Jackson, so I'll try to be brief, or house arrest over at Duke's, which is another fantastic place with everybody's favorite mannequin there in Milledgeville. But the big question right now is who the quarterback is going to be for Georgia. And this is an area where, you were talking about, think about it back in January. We didn't know if Jake Fromm was coming back or leaving, and Jake decided to go. Then Jamie Newman quit. And so, we're waiting to see if JT Daniels is going to be cleared. And by all accounts, and I think Kirby said it from the get-go, the feeling is that he will be. But I think in that time, Dwan Mathis, who was just an unbelievable story with what he went through, with what in essence was brain surgery, and with Dwan getting cleared, I think right now he's the front runner to start the first game. Of course, we'll have to wait and see. We've got a good young prospect in the fold in Carson Beck, and one of the elite prospects in the state of Georgia is verbally committed, Brock Vandegrift, who plays just down the road at Prince Avenue Christian. It looks like he will be vying to be that quarterback of the future. At running back, we lost a great one in DeAndre Swift and a good one in Brian Harrion, but we've got Zamir White back. And I'll tell you, when Zamir verbally committed, and I'm a tailback guy, going back to you-know-who, number 34, when Zamir verbally committed, I remember I went into the studio that day, and I had on a red Georgia shirt and a mesh back Georgia football hat that I'd had from the 1980s. And I was so excited, and Zamir's been through so much. But I think we could see that burst from him in the Sugar Bowl, and it reminded me of Nick Chubb in his junior year, Kirby's first year in 2016, and the injuries had really hit him. But I think you could see after that month off that he had gotten that burst back, that he had gotten that spring back. So I think Zamir is going to have a tremendous year, and he's got James Cook and Kenny McIntosh and a couple of talented freshmen in. The big question right now on offense, along with quarterback, you've got the offensive line, which has been reworked. Who's going to be that number 2 receiver with George Pickens? What's going on at tight end right now with the injury situation with Trey McKitty? And so I think you have to step back and kind of big picture this thing. When you think about Jake Fromm, Andrew Thomas, DeAndre Swift, and Rodrigo Blankenship, that is a tremendous amount of production that Georgia has lost there. And then you throw in the fact that Isaiah Wilson and Solomon Kinley both turned pro, and Cade Mays transferred. Those are some blows to absorb, certainly. But there's nobody playing any violins or crying for Georgia, because there is a tremendous amount of talent out there. Now, at the same time, we're going to try and mold and meld all that with a new offensive coordinator. So there could be some growing pains there. But fortunately, Georgia has a defense which has a chance to be great. We've got a great punter. And as we try and figure this out, and obviously it's going to be ramped up and go at a very fast pace, I think there's some excitement with that naturally comes, and it's a part of college athletics with a relatively rapid turnover that you get. So I certainly feel good about the quarterback position for the short term, and definitely for down the road. And I think that's one of those deals, and I know we talk about this a lot. If there's a spot where you don't necessarily feel good, maybe you feel insecure and young for a given year, what you're hoping for is that this time next year, of course, this time next year will be a month into the season, but 11 months from now, that'll be a spot where you feel really, really good. So moving on to wide receiver there, George Pickens, I think he showed in the Sugar Bowl what he was capable of. There was an incident at Tech, which was just nuts. And I think George really grew from that. And he has made a commitment to be the absolute best. And I think he has a chance to be one of the elite receivers in the country. Who those other guys are going to be around him, it's anybody's guess. I think you're going to see some true freshmen vying for the position. I think Jermaine Burton is a player that you can keep an eye on there. Will we see Demetrius Robertson as a fifth-year senior step up? And Kearis Jackson, who's from Fort Valley, is a player that I think has a chance there. Tight end, Trey McKitty came in as a graduate transfer from Florida State and was really practicing well, but he got banged up. He's questionable for that first game. But I feel like McKitty is the type of player, though it's a different position, who could have the kind of impact that Lawrence Cager had when he came in from Miami, and that he never really had an outstanding quarterback in college. And you could see Cager, when he was healthy last year, what he was able to do with Jake Fromm. So at tight end, you got a lot of young faces out there. You've got John Fitzpatrick as a sophomore. You got 2 redshirt freshmen and the highly touted true freshman out of Las Vegas named Darnell Washington. The offensive line, I'm going to channel my inner Munson here, scares me to death. I think we've got a chance to be really good up there, but to go into the season, we've got one player who started a total of 1 game at offensive tackle, and that was Jamari Salyer, who did a great job in the Sugar Bowl last year playing right tackle. So the plan now is likely for Jamari Salyer, who was a 5-star recruit, to be the left tackle. You'll probably see Owen Condon play the right tackle. There's some very good young players in the fold there, and Warren McClennan and Xavier Truss, who are redshirt freshmen. And again, as I mentioned with Coach Luke, that's a position that Georgia recruited very well. You've got a couple of potential future stars there, and Broderick Jones and Tate Ratledge. And as Coach Dooley used to say for recruiting, there's a big-time 5-star out there from down in Cochrane. So we got our poles in the water for some mighty big fish. On the interior, you'll see Trey Hill back at center, who has the potential to be an all-SEC player. At guard with Ben Cleveland, who's been around. I mean, he started the tail end of that 2017 SEC championship campaign, and Justin Schaefer, who's a senior. You've certainly got some experience there. Warren Erickson got his first significant playing time in the Sugar Bowl and did a really good job. And again, that's a spot where Georgia's got some very good talent coming in on the interior of that offensive line, and also for the upcoming class of 2021, including a commitment from a player named Jared Wilson out of North Carolina, who's got a chance to be really, really good. We've got a couple of in-state commitments from Micah Morris and Dylan Fairchild, who are both very good players on that offensive line. So the future is certainly bright there. We've got a terrific O-line coach in Matt Luke, a lot of great young players. There could be some growing pains early this year. And, the bottom line is with 10 games, SEC versus SEC, you are going to be facing a lot of really tough and a lot of really strong defenses. One of the biggest keys is going to be, can Georgia, despite some of the missteps of last season, Georgia did a great job not turning the ball over. We only threw interceptions in 2 games. I'll give you a guess which 2 games those were. And then we had that turnover spree against Tech, which was, we played our worst quarter of the year and still beat them 52-7. So that was kind of nice. Moving over to the defense, I think this has a chance to be a great unit. And one of the things I'm sure that Kirby is pushing here with the stop unit is to not, and I know kids these days probably don't even know what press clippings are, but basically don't buy into the hype too much. And I think last year's offensive line would be a very good example of that. They were good. They were very good in pass blocking, but they were certainly not the dominant unit that was touted to be the best in all of college football. So I think that's been an easy message for Kirby to transcend to the defense that, yeah, you guys are here and you might be the best. Everybody said that about our O-line last year. Does anybody think they were? And again, they were good. They were solid, but they were certainly not dominant. So the question now, can this defense be dominant? The pieces are definitely there when you start up front. And man, I love defensive linemen too. Big Jordan Davis, we could see the impact he had when he moved into the lineup in the second half of the 2018 season. He's going to be the nose tackle. Trayvon Walker, probably the best defensive line prospect we've had since Jonathan Sullivan, and David Pollock. And he had arguably the defensive play of the year with the sack to preserve that sweet victory at Auburn, which makes it 12 out of 15 against the Tigers. Malik Herring made the call to come back for his senior year, which was big. Julian Rochester, Kirby's a master with working that roster. He got the 4 games in, was never fully healthy, so he's back at 100%. Devontae Wyatt's a really good player up front. And another guy to keep an eye on who's a big-time recruit Georgia's bringing in, Jalen Carter from the state of Florida. I think he could jump in there and be that number 6 guy. Linebacker, Georgia should be outstanding. I mean, terrific there. And to me, it starts with Azeez Ojulari. I think he's got a chance to be a great, great player. He's a redshirt sophomore, had a big-time impact last year. And I felt when Georgia in the Tennessee game slid him down to be more of a defensive end, and Georgia started going with that 4-man front, I thought that's when the defense played its best football this season. But he's tremendous. You got Nolan Smith back. You got Quay Walker, Jermaine Johnson, who's a junior college transfer, Walter Grant. Should be absolutely stacked there. I think Nakobe Dean in the middle's got a chance to be a great player. You got Monty Rice back, and so much talent on the inside as well with Channing Tindall, as I mentioned, Quay Walker, who can go inside and out. Georgia's in a very, very good position at linebacker. So much so Georgia only signed 1 linebacker last year. That was MJ Sherman, who's a prospect from Maryland. And that was, he's going to be a guy as well. This year he'll be a bit of that understudy. That is definitely a position of need for recruiting this year. And Georgia's recruiting well there. And again, that's another spot where there's an elite prospect that Georgia's got the old pole in the water. In the secondary, I think that's a position that you've been able to see in Kirby's career, Georgia make a great deal of progression in terms of talent and in terms of depth. And we'll start at the cornerback position. Eric Stokes is a big-time player. One of the things about Stokes, he was a state track champion in Georgia, which means he's really fast, and those track times don't lie. But he came in and started showing in the early portion of the 2018 season that he was physical as well. I believe he's a young man who will be a very high draft pick. Tyson Campbell, who's a 5-star, is probably going to be the other corner. We got DJ Daniel, who will be fine as a backup cornerback there. It's safety. Richard LeCounte is back for his 4th season, and Richard was really one of the bell cows that helped bring in that class of 2017. Lewis Seen started the SEC title game in the Sugar Bowl, played really well. He's got a chance to be a big-time player, and Mark Webb will be that that nickel. He'll be that star position player. And another guy that we saw who helped have a breakup right before Trayvon's sack over at Auburn is Tyreek Stevenson, who could really play any of those positions in the secondary and could even be a contender to be our punt returner this year. On the special teams, with Jake Camarda, about the middle of last year, Jake found the stroke and he found his consistency, and I thought he was as good as anyone. Place kicker, I just don't know right now. My broadcast partner, Mr. Butler, would certainly know a lot more than me. I'm sure Georgia would love for Jared Zirkle, who's a true freshman, to win the job. But there's going to be a lot of competition there. And I think what's most important at that position, there are not too many Rex Robinsons, Alan Levitt's, Kevin Butlers, John Casey's out there who can go out there and make just the clutch 50-plus yarders. What is so important to me is that 32-yarder, the 37-yarder. When you're first and goal at the 8-yard line in Tuscaloosa and you get that inevitable holding penalty, and then you're first and goal on the 18-yard line, and it's going to be extremely difficult to score. You've got to be able to make the 30, the 32, the 35, the 28-yard field goal, because really short of a block punt or a defensive touchdown by the other guy, nothing takes the wind out of the sails more than a short field goal miss. And I'll throw this out there, and I'm sure every coach has seen it. And I know for a lot of this crew, we've all watched a lot of football the last 2 weeks. The kicking in college football in the NFL, special teams overall, see the Atlanta Falcons, has been absolutely abysmal. And I don't know how much the altered practice schedules have had to do with that, but I would bet there are a lot of teams that, after watching games these first 2 weeks, have looked at special teams as a whole and said, holy smokes, we better shore everything up. And that's another area where Kirby has done such a good job in improving our special teams. I know we'd like to see some more explosion there, and hopefully that's a situation where we can find somebody in that return game who can give us a little bit of juice. Maybe it'll be James Cook on kickoff returns. We'll see. Real quickly, I'll run through the schedule. I hope I haven't bored everybody to death here, but I've had to rememorize it 3 or 4 times. But to open up at Arkansas, we'll see that familiar face in Sam Pittman, and I'm going to channel my Dooley Munson here. He knows our personnel. He knows any strength and weakness our guys have on defense, and he certainly knows the strength and weaknesses of our offense. And you had darn well better respect every opponent every week. And I think when you look at the Big 12, not this past week, but the weekend before, they had Kansas, who is awful, but still they lost to Coastal Carolina. Kansas State lost to Arkansas State, and Iowa State lost to the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana Lafayette, who just beat Georgia State in overtime. So you better be ready. And if you disrespect an SEC opponent, no matter who it is, do so at your own peril. The Auburn game is the next Saturday. And you talk about a series where we've gone from the everlasting no into the everlasting yay. I think back to when I was a kid, from 1983 through 1990, Auburn beat us 7 out of 8 years. And now to think that we've beaten them 12 out of 15, highlighted, of course, by that 2017 Southeastern Conference Championship game victory. It's just an incredible turn of events there. The game is always so huge. Auburn always has been, always will be our biggest recruiting rival. They're right next door, 30 minutes from Columbus, and they're gunning for us. What's going to be so bizarre, and this even before the COVID hit, the Auburn game with the SEC altering its schedule had been moved to October, which was bizarre because it's always been the last, or for many years, or next to last home game, depending on the season. And to think about playing that in October was bizarre. And now it's the first weekend in October now, but that's going to be the home opener. Of course, when it all started back in 1892, we played them in February. So this will be the earliest we've played them since we got the whole thing started way back when. Then Tennessee comes to town. So the back-to-back home games with Auburn and Tennessee are going to be huge. I think kind of like what I said about Coach Pittman, I think with Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee and with Will Muschamp at South Carolina, they came from the same coaching tree that Kirby did. So those games are usually going to be a little extra tough, a little extra grinder, extra hard fought, because there's so much similarity in terms of strategy, alignment, tactical aspects of the game. There's just a great deal of familiarity there. Then we go over to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. They're going to be loaded. What Nick Saban has done in recruiting, and of course Kirby was a huge part of that, is amazing. I looked at a prospective NFL draft for next April. They've got 10 of the top 40 prospects, and they brought back 3 players who are potential first-round picks. So, hopefully we go in there 3-0, and I think we'll have a shot, but certainly no looking ahead allowed. Now, I promise you there's not a team in the country that's got a tougher stretch than Auburn, Tennessee, and Alabama. And then you worry about those, don't go sleeping on Kentucky. We got to go to Lexington that next Saturday. They got everybody back on their line of scrimmage, so don't fall asleep on that one. We get the off date, and then we get the Gators in Jacksonville, and they have become, and I know we were like that for a long time when they were controlling the series, they have become absolutely obsessed with it. And no doubt amongst the highlights of the Kirby Smart era here at Georgia are the 3 victories in a row over the Gators in Jacksonville. So sweet. Then we go to Missouri, kind of similar to what we were just talking about with Kentucky. You got to be careful about that one. Missouri made a good hire, and Eli Drinkwitz, they hired him from Appalachian State. It's a very good play caller. Another school that made a very good hire we play next, and that's Mississippi State. Mike Leach, he's going to throw the football a ton. That's one I wish we would have gotten a little earlier in the year before he could get that offense in sync. He brought in a transfer quarterback from Stanford named KJ Costello, who's a good one. And then we go to Columbia to play South Carolina. Just like I was saying with Tennessee, there's a lot of familiarity there. And obviously South Carolina, they pulled off the upset last year in Athens. And we turned the ball over, but give them a lot of credit. They played really well in the line of scrimmage. And that was a prime example of when you make those kind of mistakes, anybody in this league can beat you. So that's one just to keep in mind. We went 11-1. They went 4-8, but they beat us. And then we end with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's going through some struggles right now, and that game, that is really going to be odd. It's going to be played on December the 5th with Vanderbilt coming to Sanford Stadium. But obviously that's a game. If this is going to be a championship type year, that's a game that Georgia should win. And then the SEC championship game will be 2 weeks after that, and hopefully Georgia will be back in there. The fact that we've been to 3 in a row, it puts our program and Kirby Smart in some elite company. The only other coaches and schools that have been there, Florida with Steve Spurrier went to the first 5 from 92 through 96. Gene Stallings took Alabama to the first 3 from 92 through 94, and Nick Saban got Alabama there 3 years in a row from 2014 through 2016. So we've already made some great history going 3 in a row, and hopefully this year we can make it 4 straight. I will say we've played an SEC-only schedule, and I feel like we've got a chance each and every Saturday. I think anybody who does better than 8-2 against a 10-game conference-only schedule has had a phenomenal season. And I think a team that would do that would put themselves in a position that if they did win in Atlanta, they would be the first 2-loss team to make it to the college football playoff. So that is either brief or too long-winded, depending on how you look at it, overview of what I think of the season. And I do want to say before we take any questions here, if you have any questions, that it just absolutely breaks my heart not being in Milledgeville. It truly is my favorite night of the year, year in and year out. And Larry does such an unbelievable job with the club. The Alumni Association does such an unbelievable job. And in the Milledgeville chapter, I say, you guys, I love you because we all have so much of that same love for Georgia in our hearts. And that's why Larry and I were really, really trying our very best to make sure that we could in some form or fashion have this meeting this year. And I know doing it over Zoom is not ideal, But I can't wait to, if you'll have me back, to get back in Milledgeville next year. And to answer any questions anybody might have, I'll lead off with this, and Larry can back me on this, as can Allie and Sarah, who have done such a great job putting this together. I am wearing pants. I know there are a lot of people on Zoom who have been busted not wearing pants, but I am wearing pants here tonight, and my wife made sure I was. So I would be glad to take any questions that anyone may have, but I also want to say hello to one of the great Georgia fans out there. I know he's dialed in. The mayor of Milledgeville, the great Alex Goodrich. So, Alex, I hope you're doing good, buddy. #1 Georgia fan. So, I will be glad to take any questions. Larry, is that coming from you, my friend?
JD, we do have questions. Can you hear me?
I got you loud and clear, my friend. A little Smokey
All
and
right.
the Bandit. This is a new version of CB radio.
We heard from a lot of people. Cherie Levy did not have a question, but I want to give a shout out to the Bulldog Illustrated, who does just a great job covering Georgia and also covers our event in Milledgeville. Michael Abramowitz asked, will the Redcoat band play in the stands?
That's a good, I believe the band is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be full or limited, but my understanding is that the Redcoats will be playing. Again, that stuff is way over my pay grade, bongo only pawn and game of life, but it is my understanding that the band will be there, which I think is awesome and essential. I mean, I think for any of us, when you hear those Redcoats, and I can tell you, just being in 5 Points, getting up in the morning, when you hear the Redcoats practicing, it certainly gets the goosebumps going. So thank you, Michael.
For sure. Bob C. asked, which you answered, about the kicker to replace Rodrigo.
Yeah, I would guess that Zirkle would probably be the front runner right now, but there are a couple of good walk-ons, and there is the potential option of Jake Camarda. Now, Kevin Butler has said he thinks somebody trying to do field goals, kickoffs, punting, that at best you're going to be 80%. And an example I always go back to, you remember the kid who was a great kicker from Oklahoma, Austin Seibert. He did all three. Remember what happened in the Rose Bowl? The squib kick didn't work, and we blocked a field goal, as you may recall. So, and plus that's one of those, me being Mr. Pessimist there with the Munson Dooley background, that if something happened to him, holy smoke. So kind of what Kevin has said, he's felt like if Camarda is the best kicker, is the gap bigger between the second best kicker or the second best punter? And wherever the gap was bigger, it was Kevin's advice to go with Jake at that spot.
You mentioned J.G. Burnett asked a question. You mentioned Darnell Washington. You think you're a red shirt?
I would guess Washington's going to play, and it's great to hear from the Burnetts. They're a wonderful family. We got to spend some time with them in St. Simon's Island last summer, which now seems like it was about 20 years ago, doesn't it? But now I would think that Darnell is going to play, and I believe that 4-game redshirt rule is still in effect. Some of the stuff's a little bit cloudy, and I understand, because you know what's most important is just to get up and going. But I think another thing with a prospect like that, even if a prospect like that, I'm not saying he is, even if they are raw and you feel like it might be a project, I think you look at a kid like that and you say, what are the odds he's going to be a fifth-year senior? No, probably not all that great. So I think at that point you get a player like that as much experience as you possibly can.
I know you're a betting man. Bob Baylor asked, 10 conference games versus 8. You already said 8-2 would be great. Can someone go unbeaten in the SEC in 2020?
I think it would be extremely difficult. Alabama would be the best bet to do it. I mean, think about this. In 2017, we played 10 games against SEC teams. We went 8-2 in those games. Got that last one, oof. But yeah, it's very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. Yes.
Jason Jones asked, do we have enough firepower on offense to win the East and beat them Gators?
Let's hope so. I think we've got a lot of pieces. And again, I think so much of the success is going to be predicated on Zamir White and George Pickens playing big. And I think with that, we can play off of that some. If Dwan is indeed the quarterback, I think he'll give us some things on the ground that could open some things up a little bit. But, the bottom line last year, we played great defenses, and we had a lot of all-time great Georgia players there, but we just didn't score a lot. We had 23 against Notre Dame, had 17 against South Carolina, 21 against Kentucky, 24 against Florida, 27 against Missouri, 21 against Auburn, and 19 against Texas A&M. But again, the one thing we did a great job with was those turnovers. So can we keep the turnovers down and maybe get the point production around the same, if not a little bit up at the start of the season, then hopefully that offense is going to gel as the year goes along. And if we could head to Jacksonville at 4-1, it's the same spot we've been in so many times, really going back to Coach Richt and Coach Don, and you go down there undefeated or once beaten and you win, then you're in a position to accomplish all your goals.
Keller Withers asked on George Pickens. I know he had the unsportsmanlike against Tech, which I know if you were in there, you would have had one yourself. How good can he be?
I think he's got a chance to be a really, really great player. I would say that A.J. Green is the best wide receiver we've had in the 21st century and maybe the most talented ever. Lindsey Scott will always be my favorite and Malcolm Mitchell, number 2. But I would say he's got a chance to be in that A.J., Lindsey Scott, Fred Gibson, Malcolm Mitchell. And I think when you look at his size and the things he can do, there's some natural comparisons there to A.J. and to Julio. And by the way, for fans, if you look at a still photo of A.J. Green's touchdown catch at Colorado in the corner of the end zone, the legendary Larry of Lake Sinclair is actually in that photo. So it's a definite keepsake.
I wasn't playing defense, though. My best buddy, the Rock Dog from Macon, last night we had a Macon Touchdown Club meeting with Kevin Butler. And it's interesting, Kevin pointed out that you have a tight ends coach, a quarterback coach, you got every position coach, but you don't have a kicking coach. And we had great success when Kevin was a graduate assistant there and turned Rodrigo around to be one of the best kickers in the country. Why don't we have a kicking coach?
Way over my pay grade. I know this about the game. You better trust your quarterback and you better trust your kicker. I think kicker, for that point, even a deep snapper, I think are 2 of the top 3-4 positions on a team. And, I don't know exactly how Kirby's managing all that. Kevin is often consulted on things, but listen, for anything kicking related, if one of the number 5s, if Rex Robinson or Kevin Butler says something, I defer to them because they sure as hell know a lot more about it than I do. J.D.G.
Burdett asked another question concerning the offense and Monken's playbook. Dewan and JT, how are they picking up things?
I think everything's going well, but obviously this is a situation for any team that got in a new coordinator, a new head coach, new quarterback, whatever it may be. Not having spring practice was a big, big blow. So you think about it now, we've lost our starting quarterback twice in Jake Fromm, and then it was presumably going to be Jamie Newman. Now, you've had the same number of practices when we started back up, and I guess early August. Good Lord, it's hard to keep track of the days and the months, isn't it? But it's been spread out a little bit longer. So I think I remember even when Dewan came in, Kirby talked about him really just being a sponge, that he's taken in everything. And JT was a starter as a freshman at USC. And again, I might have mentioned this earlier, kind of the reputation that Todd Monken has had, and he's moved around a lot. He's an excellent offensive coach, is that, and I think this is what any coach should do, is that he has his offense styled and basically geared towards the talent that he has. So, if you got a boatload of running backs, you're going to run it more. If you don't really have a great running back, you got a bunch of great wide receivers, you're going to throw it more. So, again, to me, that's where I think it just comes down to finding the right personnel, having Zamir and Pickens be those guys, and having some of those young understudies and some veterans who've been around raise their game up and play off of those elite talent players.
David Jones asks, if JT is not cleared for Arkansas, and I'm a little surprised we're getting pretty close when he should be cleared, is Becker Bennett the backup QB?
Whew. God, that's a good question. At this point, when I say the experience of Stetson, I think he's played around 35 plays. I'm not really sure on that one. I think Beck has a lot of upside. The coaches really like him. I guess it would just be a situation of, is it a series? Is it a few plays? So that's when it comes to playing multiple quarterbacks, that is definitely something that you want to do by design, not have thrust on you. It's kind of like what I've said many times, the key to happiness in life is throwing when you want to, not when you have to. And if you're getting a quarterback changes thrust upon you, you're in trouble.
Has the size of the travel squad changed at all this year due to COVID-19?
I believe it is still 70 is the number. For SEC games, you've always been able to dress 70, and when I say always, I mean in recent history. For non-conference games, and obviously we don't have any this year, you can pretty much dress everybody. But no, it's 70 is the number.
Bob C. asks again, how are the broadcasters and commentators affected by the restrictions on the game? Or is it going to be pretty much as it has been?
This is going to be one of those. And again, the last game I broadcast was March 11th. It was a baseball game in Statesboro. And I honestly don't know right now. I'm not going to be traveling to Arkansas. So Kevin and I are going to be doing our post-game show in a conference room on Millage Avenue. Or I guess we could just do it right here in my living room as well. But so that's where we're going to be doing that. I'm not sure if they're going to be partitions, wearing the masks. So that's something for this first game. It doesn't really affect me, but I know the broadcasters will be traveling separate for the team, and I would imagine every team that they're going to try and keep it just in that bubble as much as they can with the players.
We will be doing the Hilltop event on Sundays, one of my favorite events, won't we?
100%. My favorite part of the week, especially when we win. And it's a great way. And I love the Hilltop. Chris Lloyd's such a good friend. And Larry, you and Chris are friends. And they've been a great supporter of us. And when the Dogs win, to go there to the Hilltop and get those bacon-wrapped shrimp and the French toast on a Sunday morning, it's sweet. And I know it's I've gotten a couple of very kind messages today from big-time Georgia fans just asking about the Bulldog Brunch, saying that is just such a big part of the weekend. And I can't tell you how much that means to me. And hopefully after losses, we're a soothing voice, because I can tell you, I love Georgia so much. And, man, I hurt so bad when we lose. I still do. It's kind of pitiful. I'm still like the same little 9 and 10-year-old kid crying after damn Dan Marino and Todd Blackledge and Pitt and Penn State and those Sugar Bowls. But it still just tears me up when the Dogs lose. So we always, and Larry, I know you always mentioned one of my great heroes, Dan McGill, that he was always a good voice of reason. So I hope we can be, when times aren't great, a good calming voice. And when times are good, we're helping cheerlead everything on. But at all times, we're always leading the Georgia parade, because we all love the Georgia Bulldogs.
How he's gonna handle not playing.
Who wins? Sam Holmes wants to know who wins one-on-one, Brandon Young or Connor O'Neill?
Ooh, that's hard. I mean, that's like asking, oftentimes I'm compared with, do I look more like Tom Brady or Roger Federer? That is a hard call right there. I would say this. I like Brandon's outside game better and Connor's inside game better. But two great Georgia Bulldog walk-on players there who are tremendous young men and great Bulldogs. But that's like a Sophie's Choice question, Sam. That's cold, man. That's cold.
Robert Cannon, I know you can make him some money. What 4 teams are going to make the CFS playoffs?
The whole Big Ten thing's interesting now, isn't it? With them coming in, I think Clemson's a pretty darn good bet. So I'll go Clemson, Ohio State, and 2 from the SEC. I think a Big 12 team would have to go undefeated to get in.
Perfect. One more question, and I know the answer to that. I believe you'll be starting your pregame show at high noon on Saturday.
High noon on Saturday, and then Kevin and I, and Kevin's been in Macon. He's in Chicago today, and he'll be back with us. So we'll be at high noon on Saturday, and of course have the dog talk afterwards, and the Bulldog brunch on Monday, and just can't wait to get back started with it. It's been such a surreal year, and even though this is an extremely different form of doing it, to be with our dear friends and fellow Bulldog lovers from Milledgeville, which is always going to have a special place in my heart. This has been a great night, albeit very different. I can't wait to get back down next season.
We will do it next season. That's all the questions, JD. I appreciate your time. Thank you, all of the Bulldog Nation, for being on here. We have a little bit of a surprise for you coming up now. I'd like to introduce Diana Fontaine, who's the Associate Director of the Alumni Chapters, and she always loves making it down to Milledgeville for this event. And we always conclude this event with Diana calling the dog. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Larry. And before I do that, please, everybody, join me in saying a big thank you to Jeff Dantzler for joining us tonight, for Larry Edwards and the entire Milledgeville chapter of the Alumni Association for putting this on. This was spectacular, and it's always so great to hear from you guys. It never really feels like Saturday in Athens until we get to see both of you guys the Tuesday before. So everybody, please drop your thanks in the chat, drop a little go dogs, but put your fists up with me and let's call them. Go dogs, sick 'em. Go dogs. Have a great night, you guys.